All right, welcome into Sportsbit Betting Insight today. Paulie and Teddy, Monday, July 11th. Big game breakdown is going to be the Home Run Derby and the All-Star Game. We continue with team previews in the NFL. Green Bay Packers up today. But we start, as always, with bad beats and bad bets. A bad bet to start it, bad beat to start it. The A's as high as plus $1.70. 2 outs in the ninth. You're supposed to cash that ticket, Teddy.
Oh, it's just brutal. I mean, the throwing Samoan throws a gem. Oakland not dominates. They're up 1-0. But when you got a plus 170 dog and you're 1 out away from cashing, and then Madsen can't get that last out. And, of course, then they lost it in the 10th with a 2-out error. The A's limp into the break, 13 games under 500. They'll be sellers at the deadline. Really tough beat for Oakland and their supporters on Sunday.
And the San Francisco Chronicle had the report that they're going to trade Reddick. Valbuena had a big home run, too, so the A's blew a couple games in that series. A bad bet, the Angels and the Orioles over, bet from 10 to 11. Tillman does it again, Teddy.
Yeah, I mean, the two teams combined to go 1 for 15 with runners in scoring position. They combined to leave 19 runners on base. So that's bad beat territory. But, I mean, Tillman threw another gem.
Yeah.
And the Orioles are now 16-3 in his 19 starts this year. Tillman, number 1 in MLB in profitability. He's ahead of Johnny Cueto. He's ahead of Steven Strasburg. Strasburg's only lost 1 game. The Nats have only lost 1 game he's pitched in all year. And Tillman is still more profitable than either one of those guys because you're not laying any type of a price to support him, and you're getting him at an underdog price every once in a while as well. But, bad bet, that number. Up from 10 to 11. The Angels and Orioles never sniffed an overcash on Sunday.
The Reds were a bad bet. I didn't understand this. Plus $1, as high as plus $1.59. Bet down or close plus $1.24, and they got thumped. Bullpen did it again.
Yeah, the markets went nuts betting Cincy on Sunday, and I couldn't figure out why either. I mean, Stanton played for Miami, hit another dinger. All of a sudden, he's hot. 5 home runs in his last 5 ball games. We'll talk about Giancarlo Stanton when it comes to an MLB home run derby breakdown in just a few moments on this show. But, Stanton was in. Miami didn't have a roster that was devoid of all talent. But the markets just went nuts. But I think there's a lot of anti-Kohler money out there in the markets. There certainly was for this ball game. I mean, when the Reds were as high as plus 159 and they closed as low as plus 124, that's a lot of money moving the markets for that one. But one last chance before the break for the Cincy bullpen meltdown.
Yeah.
Josh Smith lit up this time as the Marlins go into the All-Star break on a nice little roll.
Sure are. They're right there. Quick UFC 200 recap. Some of the fights were disappointing, but once they went to TV on Fox Sports 1, 7 of the 9 fights went over. A bad bet was Mark Hunt. Don't disrespect the lines maker. Lesnar opened the favorite. Hunt was as high as $1.75. Lesnar wins by decision. That was as high as 6-1 in some spots. Aldo small dog won. Lesnar small dog won. Other than that, the big shock got there. And a nice call by Adam Hill, our guest on the show Friday. He said there was value there with Nunez and that she could beat Miesha Tate. And she sure did. The big dog came through in the main event. She tore her apart in the first round. And, she was bleeding everywhere. Probably shattered her nose, which the damage she did early on. So there's a UFC 200 recap and a good job by Lesnar. And thanks to Adam Hill for coming on. Our play of the day, money time. How did France lose? What the hell happened? 18?
I'm still trying to figure it out, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, Ronaldo went out early with an injury. That was certainly a factor. But shots on goal, 2-1.
Yep. 18-9. 18-9. You're at home. Ronaldo out early and they can't score. And then the keeper gave up a soft one, too, from way out, bounced twice, and Portugal wins. I think that was the first time France lost a tournament game at home since 1960. And they weren't happy afterwards. They were rioting and everything. They had to call the cops and all the madness there. Some good. Darren Ravel had a good tweet about that with the picture by the Eiffel Tower. But, I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, I was in a riot off a loss once when Michigan lost that first national championship to Duke in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
People were going nuts in the streets. The cops came out. The tear gas came out. It was no fun, Paul. I'm laughing about it now, 25 years after the fact or something. But at the time, you're mad at everyone. You're mad at the cops. You're mad at the team. You're mad at yourself. You ever been in one of these riots post-event?
It happened once in Minnesota when they won the college hockey championship, which they won it. But I remember watching television. In 1994, the Canucks lost to the Rangers in the Stanley Cup Finals. And then a
Yes.
couple years ago, they lost at home to Boston. They almost burned the city down twice, and they lost, so they were pissed off, which is strange. All right, All-Star game coming up. Let's start with the home run derby tonight, Teddy. And the big discussion here is what the dimensions and how the ball doesn't travel in Petco Park will affect these guys tonight.
Yeah, I mean, let's start here. Let's take a look at Darren Williams' tweet talking about the average home run distance of the home run derby contestants. And of this, Carlos Gonzalez has the biggest, the longest average, with Stanton just behind him. Todd Frazier, Robinson Cano at the short end of the spectrum. Now, this matters, obviously, when you talk about the average length of a home run. We're talking about Petco, which has been the single most pitcher-friendly ballpark in baseball since it opened. They moved the fences in, they moved the fences down, and we've actually seen a fair few overs at Petco, both this year and last, as a result of that, with the markets, they were still hanging 6.5s and 7s at Petco, and the number probably should have been in the baseline total probably should have been in that 7.5 range. But the bottom line is the weaker guys aren't necessarily going to be hitting home runs very easily here, and I think that does give an edge to the big boppers, Cargo and Stanton.
I can't believe the big names sat this one out. There's no big names in this thing.
Yeah, it's kind of Stanton is not a second-tier name, and Carlos Gonzalez isn't a second-tier name. Everybody else probably is, though. I mean, when you're thinking about, let's see a home run derby between Adam Duvall and Will Myers, Kyle Seager, Todd Frazier, these aren't names that we normally think of as being the biggest boppers in MLB. What do? You have an opportunity to bet the lines that are in front of you. This is who we got. Let's talk about some strategies for betting the home run derby, because it's not something that, look, everyone's priced in that 4, 5, 6 to 1 range basically to win the thing. When you talk about the pros and how they're going to approach something like a home run derby, basically they're likely to leave it alone. When you talk about multiple options, where it's not A or B, it's not, the matchups are a superior wager. Where it's either person A or person B, you lay your juice, that's that. When you're talking about multiple options, and in this case 8 options, there's a much bigger house takeout. There's a lot more juice that you have to overcome, and you better be sure that you have an edge when you're making those type of wagers. So, maybe Stanton's hot right now. He's someone that we've kind of ripped on Sportsbet all year long with all of his struggles. Maybe you look at Stanton as someone who's kind of heating up right now, but the guy I got my eye on, Will Myers, who plays at Petco and is, fairly comfortable in this setting. What surprised me when we look at the matchup lines, Todd Frazier laying against Cargo. Cargo's got the longest distance in all of baseball, but the longest average home run distance, I say, in this home run derby. But the fact that he plays at Coors means that those stats are somewhat devalued.
Yeah, Stanton prop to have the longest home run. That cashed a couple of years ago. And, maybe no Trout, no Harper. I wanted to see Mad Bum get in there, too. He told Bochy, let me get in this, but they said no. Remember what happened with Jock Peterson last year? A lot of people in the Dodgers organization thought it ruined his swing and was a big reason why he had a horrible second half, because of what happened to the home run derby. That's something to consider as well. Well, this will be a matchup, will be play of the day after we preview the Packers. Up next, we'll get to the All-Star game. We'll run that down in Big Game Breakdown coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Always on the go? Bet365 has one of the top mobile platforms in today's market. Sign up today and don't let your busy life keep you out of the game.
All right, back on Big Game Breakdown. All-Star game Tuesday night. National League $1.15, 7.5 the total. How do you handicap this one, Teddy?
Well, the first thing you want to do is take a look at some of the recent All-Star games. My basic point for a handicapping All-Star game, it's not an easy handicap. I'm going to say it's for action junkies only, but no, there have been years and recent years in which I found a wager. Basically, again, let's flash this graphic right now with the last 8 All-Star games. What you see, the lines are always short, but look at the totals. As recently as 2008, we're talking about totals of 10 in an All-Star game. 2009, it goes down to 9, and then 8.5, and then 8, and then last year 7.5, and this year 7.5. There was a nice stretch there for underbettors, where the totals were priced significantly too high based on the modern game, based on one-inning relief appearances and guys coming in and throwing their best stuff. And in a one-inning situation, the pitcher usually has an edge over the hitter, and that's been the case in just about every recent All-Star game. So I have made bets on the All-Star game in recent years, but now only because I thought the total was priced in the wrong range. That's not the case anymore. Obviously, with 7.5, 2 years ago, the All-Star game pushed against the total. Last year, it went over the total. So when you talk about what kind of edges you can find edges, but sometimes they're fleeting.
How do you feel about that this decides home field advantage? A lot of people are bothered by that in the World Series.
Sure. I mean, I don't blame people for being bothered for that, but something's going to decide home field advantage.
About best record?
Yeah, well, one would think best record might be a better.
Than some.
But again, I mean, Selick took so much heat for that one All-Star game that ended in a tie.
Yep, threw his
and
hands up.
Obviously, it was foolish. And then there were a bunch of knee-jerk reactions. Oh, let's make the All-Star break meaningful in some way.
And the networks
All-Star
were
game
pissed.
Meaningful.
Yep.
And this is the end result of it, is that you have the All-Star game deciding who gets home field in the World Series, which A and B have nothing to do with each other. So, no, I can't say I'm a fan of that. But that being said, on my list of things that have to be changed, I mean, okay, it has to be changed, but it's not like I'm freaking out about it because, again, this isn't a game that I'm going to have a dime on, Paulie. It's not even maybe, unless something happens between now and the first pitch that sends this line skyrocketing one way or the other. I mean, you can take advantage of, right now we have the a situation where the NL's a short favorite. If I see the NL at a plus price an hour before the first pitch, maybe I look at the National League. If I see the total significantly up from that 7.5, which isn't going to happen, but if I do, maybe I'll make a wager in the hour before the game. But, I mean, basically, the loser hasn't scored more than 3 runs in the last 8 years.
Yeah.
There may be opportunities for in-game wagering, but pregame, prior to the first pitch, at the current lines, there's no bet for me, Paulie. Anything for you?
No, never bet an All-Star game. No, nothing here. We'll get play of the day coming up, going back to the home run derby. All right, NFL now. Green Bay Packers. Over under 10.5 wins. Split line. Some shops have 11, so shop around. Last year, 10-6 straight up. 9-7 ATS. 11-5 to the under. They won the wild card game on the road against the Redskins. Then they lost that crazy game in overtime against the Cardinals. Mainstream stats, 23rd total offense, 15th total defense, tied for 25th yards per play, and they were 10th in turnover differential. But, Teddy, this is fascinating. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Rodgers. But when they lost Jordy Nelson, oh, my God, they couldn't move the football, and nobody could get open.
I mean, it's incredible, really, when you look at the Packers' mainstream stats last year. They had the number 23 total offense. This is a team that had the number 1 scoring offense in 2014. Last year, number 23 in yards. All right, they were at or below average in basically every statistical category except turnovers, and they still won 10 games, still won a playoff game. That's certainly an impressive accomplishment for a team that wasn't anywhere near 100% last year. And you talk about Aaron Rodgers and the drop-off. I mean, it's significant. Completion percentage down 5% from 2014 to 15. Rodgers didn't get worse. His receiving core did. This is a stat that really stood out to me. Yards per pass. 2014, he's 8.4. Last year, he's 6.6. The deep ball just wasn't going. His quarterback rating down almost 20 points. Went from the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL to the number 15 scoring offense in the NFL, and the first time that Rodgers was under 100 in quarterback rating since his first season as a starter in 2008. It's worth noting there's no backup. I mean, I'm not saying no backup. Brett Hundley has potential, but he's very raw.
Yep.
And he's the backup, so Rodgers had better stay healthy again this year. He hasn't missed a game over the last 2 seasons.
All right, let's talk about the wide receivers when Nelson went down. Cobb was very disappointing, and Devontae Adams disappeared big time. And I know a lot of Packer fans were pissed off at McCarthy, saying, why didn't you play Jeff Janis? He's the guy who had a $145 and 2 touchdowns, including the Hail Mary in the playoff loss to Arizona. The guy was awesome.
Well, I mean, remember, last year McCarthy gave up the play calling. And he combined the quarterbacks and the wide receivers under one positional coach. Well, guess what? Tom Clements isn't going to be calling plays this year. It'll be back to McCarthy. And Alex Van Pelt is back to coaching only the quarterbacks. They brought in a new running back coach, a new wide receiver coach, a new tight end coach on offense. So, McCarthy gave that coaching staff a nice shakeup. Of course, Don Capers isn't going anywhere as long as McCarthy's in job on defense. He's in his 8th year as a defensive coordinator. But, now we've got Jordy Nelson returning. That's going to send Randall Cobb back to the slot where he's been effective. You talked about Devontae Adams, who was a major disappointment last year. But my biggest concern about this receiving corps, it is not deep. If injuries strike, they'll be wasting another year of an elite quarterback in his prime.
Yes.
And that's a concern here because there's a lot of things to like about Green Bay other than that receiving corps.
Yep. Lacey dropped some weight. He's supposed to be in shape. You still have Starks to worry about, so they're good at running back. All 5 starters back on the offensive line, but 3 are free agents after the season. What's going on with the defense?
Well, they lost their run stuffer, B.J. Raji. He's taking a quote-unquote hiatus from football in 2016. He hasn't ruled out a potential return. They bring in, this guy's a stud, Dayton Jones from UCLA on the defensive line. He's the number 1 pick in 2013. He's supposed to be stepping into the starter's role for Raji. And, of course, Kenny Clark, also from UCLA, the number 1 pick this year. These are guys that are primed to fill Raji's shoes. The same questions at linebacker with Clay Matthews, wanting to move back to the outside without any surefire inside linebacker ready to take his place. You got the ageless Julius Peppers, 10.5 sacks last year, back for season number 15 in the NFL. The secondary is deep. And remember, this team was 11-5 to the under last year, despite all the, partially because of those offensive woes, but the defense played very well. If those wide receivers don't step up, Paulie, they may well be an under team again this year.
That's an excellent point. Tell us about the schedule.
Well, last year, their schedule was tied for the toughest in the NFL. They had a really brutal slate. This year, 2016, a huge drop-off down to below league average based on this year's season win totals. It is the single biggest drop-off in the entire NFL, Paulie, from a percentage basis from what they faced last year, SOS, to what they faced this year. I guess it helps that they weren't the division winner a year ago. And, of course, they have a ton of marquee games. They have only 5 1 p.m. Eastern start times through the first 14 weeks of the season. They have that 2-game road trip to open the year, a 3-game trip in November, but after week 2, the next road game isn't until week 8, a very rare 4-game homestand with a bye in the middle.
Is this a Super Bowl contender?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. In that division, you want to go over, though?
It's funny because you go through the divisions, and there wasn't a team I liked in the AFC North. The NFC North, I like everyone because their schedule is relatively easy in comparison. So look at Green Bay. I can only play them over based on that massive strength of schedule differential between last year and this year. But I do worry about the Packers being something of an overvalued commodity on a week-in, week-out basis. I'm not convinced I'm going to be able to lay points with Green Bay the way that I would rather play them to win something like the division or the league, or over 10.5 wins, for example.
Back to the home run derby. Money time. Where are we going, Teddy?
Well, let's take a look at a guy who's used to hitting home runs at Petco. That would be Will Myers over Adam Duvall. That's play of the day game number 3716, a prop wager. We're going to take a minus 110 on Will Myers and expect him to beat Duvall. Park familiarity matters, and the fact that Duvall hasn't been there before, I think, matters as well. Let's take Myers minus 110 to beat Duvall. That's our play of the day in home run derby action for Monday.
All right, very good. No show tomorrow. We'll come back Wednesday. We'll recap the Derby and the All-Star game. We'll also talk to Drew Martin, 5 great minutes. We'll preview the second half of the MLB season. No show Thursday, and then we're back Friday. Regular show, big game breakdown, baseball's back, and we'll do the Minnesota Vikings and finish out the NFC North. That's coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.